Hi, I'm Brian Smith and I'm going to take you through a watercolour painting. I've chosen as my subject Times Square, New York, and the reasons are several-fold. If we just kind of have a quick glance at what this composition is about, it's relatively complicated, so one of the things I want to talk about and demonstrate is simplifying a subject. It's got lots of atmosphere in it and I want to capture that atmosphere. It's a snow scene. There's some perspective in it, which is something else I want to look at. There's actually a third vanishing point, which is quite unusual, and I want to go through some of what that involves. It's also got brights and whites, which for a watercolour artist are interesting issues to play around with. As I said, complicated. I'm going to try and rationalise this, and we'll see how we get on. I mentioned perspective, and if we just pop that on one side, and I'll run through just a couple of points with you. Most of you, no doubt, are familiar with the two-point perspective, and I've just put a couple of vanishing points there, one on either side, and I've put a horizon, which is my eye level there. And if I just maybe here indicate bird's eye view, this is a square, this is me, bird's eye view looking at a, well, I suppose a cuboid. And the perspective of that in two-point perspective shows the nearest corner here, points back to the vanishing point, or perspective lines back to the vanishing point, and that's the cuboid, if you like, in perspective. And if we just carry that further down and we draw again here, if I move to one side, to the left in this case, I'm going to see more of the left-hand side and less of the right-hand side of that cuboid. So I'm now putting a vertical leading edge across there. Do the same routine back to vanishing points. More of the left, less of the right. So you'll be familiar with this, and obviously there's or some of you will be hopefully, there's a reciprocal condition there. If I move around this side, I see more of the right, less of the left, and this is the perspective, the two-point perspective that results. So they're movements in lateral directions, and I'll take it one step further. There is another take on this, which is if I raise my viewing position so I'm looking down on my cuboid, same view as that, but I'm taking a high-level view looking down on the cuboid. So there's my leading edge, back to the vanishing point again, and we get something similar to the first one, but we get instead a view of all three planes rather than the two planes of the cuboid. There's another one, which is the low-level view of the same thing, yeah, which gives us something along those lines. So that's two-point perspective, and some of that is probably quite familiar to you. The single-point perspective, which is part of what the Times Square view is about. If I just pop this back on, there's a low-level viewing angle. The photographer was a man of average height or a lady of average height. More or less everybody is at the same height, the same eye level as the cameraman. Most of the scene is above eye level. Very little of the scene is below eye level. So in this situation, if I draw a horizon, and this is a single-point perspective to some extent, which has one vanishing point and lines radiating from it. So, but most of the lines are above the viewer's view, above the viewer's eye level.
Mind your head, Brian.
Sorry, thanks Gary. So here are my perspective lines, and if I look at maybe some objects which are placed across my field of view, and here's another one. You can see a kind of a skyscraper theme taking off here, and so on. Just following the lines of perspective in this streetscape, this happens in the same way on the opposite side. And as we come forwards, we come along these lines of perspective, and I'll put something looming over the back there. Okay, following the lines of perspective, and we'll put some passers-by getting ever larger as they approach me. These guys are all at the same depth, these guys are all nearer and larger, and so on. So that's the kind of familiar, in a sense, single point perspective. You can see how that might relate to what we've got going on in the Times Square photograph that I'm going to use. But quickly, I want to just itemize a third one, which is a third type of arrangement, which is similar to the first, but involves a vanishing point at a high level. I'll draw it over here. Hope you can catch this on screen. A vanishing point at a high level, and this is common in places where we have groups of high buildings. You know, if continued, let me just bring that across as the analogy. We have a larger mass here, gradually narrowing towards a vanishing point, which is out of picture, somewhere high up, out of picture. So that's how the building in the rear of the square behaves. It also means that because there's a vanishing point there, any other building which is in the scene has to slope to some extent in order to comply with the arrangement, you know? So if that makes sense, which I hope it does, you can see that in play. There's a slight leaning inwards of the buildings because they behave in accordance with the vanishing point. So that's the theory. Let's put that on one side. And it's the reason why, and here's the sketch, it's the reason why the central building tapers towards a vanishing point somewhere on the carpet there. And here we've got buildings leaning in slightly, not aggressively because that might overwhelm the painting, but certainly making the point that there must be a confined space with some high little buildings in it. Okay, so just moving on, I want to get some paint on this quickly. Let's quickly refer, just to give you your bearings, back to the photograph. A lot of light at the end of the tunnel in this, and it's important as I mix, and I'm going with cobalt blue here with, these are the SAA artists' colours, and I'm going with cobalt blue and maybe a little raw umber, just to take the edge off the purity of that blue. And now lots of water. So I've got myself a reasonable grey there, and I'm going to lay a wash in here, just referring to the reference for a moment. I'm laying a wash through the rear of the painting. I don't have to be too careful, apart from the fact it's not in my nature. These buildings, when they come into the painting, will be richer mixtures than the one which I've already laid. Can you see I've graded the tone towards the ground level to... it's not necessarily an effect that I would expect to see, but I think some tonal variation in here is a good move, and that will probably suffice for what's going on. I've cut around to some extent. There's a guy in here, don't know if you can see that, there's a guy in the foreground with snow on his shoulders. He looks like the businessman walking down the centre of the mall there, and I need to give him some evidence in the shot. Beginners often overdose at this stage on pigment content. It's important that the water content initially is quite high in this, so that we produce a very thin wash. If it's pigment rich, what's going to happen is that the wash will dominate, the colour will be too dark, the scene will lack contrast, and it won't be an effective painting. So try and use, if you can, all the different values in a range of values. Water rich, if I look here, there's going to be some concentrated pigment rich stuff going on if I go with these figures. This is going to be an improvisation to some extent. I'm not going to go with a chapter and verse statement, but it is important that I get in the mood of this. Hopefully I've talked long enough now for this to dry to the extent that I would like it to. Let's see. Let's lay a wash down there and see how that migrates or doesn't into the wash around it. What I'm doing there is not happy with the content of that. So I'm thinning that. I'm dragging some paint off because I think this building's coming on a bit strong. So I'm dragging some paint off that as I move down. Just paying a little bit of lip service to the content. There's advertising signboards and what have you in there. That's not quite what I was after. I was looking for more of a lost edge there, and I'm just going to lift some more off, vacuum off by dragging the brush down it, just to reduce the impact of this building a little. That'll do. And I'm going to concentrate it as we come towards the sidewalk. Straight in with the American vernacular there, hope you noticed. I'm down to sidewalk level, and I'm concentrating the wash a little. Theory behind this is that if we're at ground level here, here's our skyscraper, and it's a misty day, there's me, that distance and that distance, that's the hypotenuse, is a greater distance. I'm looking through more mist. So I expect the top of this skyscraper to start to lose itself, to lose a little bit of clarity, which is why I'm concentrating washes at sidewalk level. And I'll cast this bit of knitting off there with some whites and lights in amongst it. If I'm not happy with that later, I'll come back and dress it up a little bit. So far I've started with a thin wash, and I have added a thicker wash, which is good policy in watercolour. I'm going to rinse this brush out and just lay some water there, and I'm going to have to dry that a little, because what I'm looking for is a building which is closer than anything so far, needs to be of a darker tone, a stronger mix, and I don't want it to migrate too much. So the building here next is the one we're targeting, and I'm mixing a stronger mix. Good policy with watercolour to keep the mixtures getting ever stronger. It's obviously, watercolour is a transparent or a translucent medium, and if you go from strong to weak, you're asking for bother. So that's one reason why we do it. You would get bike runs, you know, the cauliflower edges that we're all familiar with. You would get bike runs if you go from rich to weaker mixtures.
Mind your head, please, Brian.
I'm sorry, that's that head of mine, I'm sorry I brought it. I knew it would get in the way. There we go. So I've lost these edges to some extent. It gives some idea that this is forward of that, and I'm going to go on the opposite side in a minute. As a right-hander, it wouldn't have been a bad idea to paint on this side of the work first and work my way across. That logic probably didn't escape you as it escaped me. So now I'm working at a distance, clutching the brush a little bit further back than I was doing, and I'm working down here. Let's just try changing from this brush, which is the SAA all-rounder, to an SAA 12 flat, because I'm thinking that it's going to give me some rectilinear marks, which in a built environment like this one is probably no bad thing. So I'm going to have to lean, forgive me if I'm in camera shot just for a minute, on the left. I'm just going to pop something in there and suggest another edge. I'll lean that in to make the point that or prove the point that I made earlier, and I'll take this down and carry on along those lines. You shouldn't do what I'm doing now, which is lay a thin wash after a rich wash, but I'm getting myself out of a corner that I've put myself in. There's a skyscraper further back amongst things in a paler wash, and I might with this just indicate something going on there to give us a feel for scale. I'm going to here lay a wash down, and I'm going to, in this top left hand corner, I'm going to lay a wash. There's a pale group of marks in there, and I want to get those down first, okay, and lay the darks on top of those once it's dry. Hopefully it won't be long drying, especially in these studio lights. So let's just get some marks going around there. There's a feeling of slight abandon going on here, which I think is no bad thing. I'm going to move back to the right hand side I'm coming forwards in the image again. So I'm going to go with another concentrated, more concentrated mix, which I'm allowed to do, I think. I'll go there. That's maybe a bit too concentrated. And let's vary that with some cerulean from the SAA choices. This is cerulean just to give me some indications of, well, some variety. I'll put the advertising details in, or imply them, in a minute. Let's just get a little bit of motion into that. I'll lift that off and lift that off, and we'll get some curvature going on around that. I'm going to lay in, put this down and go back to the brush, which is good for detailing. This all-rounder points well. It keeps, it hangs on to quite a lot of liquid, which is useful. What I need in my painting is, can I put that there, Gary? Is that okay?
That's fine.
What I need in my painting is a brush that holds a certain amount of water but points well. It's a synthetic brush, which suits me fine because there's more resistance to pressure, which is something I'm kind of familiar with. It's just something I've come to know. Sables are great and it's each to their own. But from my point of view, a sable has too much give in it. The same amount of pressure put on a sable as I'm putting on this brush would produce, would make the bristles bend in a way that doesn't suit me. And I think to some extent, where I've started in life with synthetics has framed, probably to some extent, the way I go about my painting. So cerulean again, I'll just cheer that and take it closer to, a little closer to green by adding a warm yellow, cadmium yellow. And I'll put something down here to that effect. You can see how we're kind of not taking too much, paying too much attention to what is happening in the reference. Provided I get the mood of this, I'll be happy. I'm going to lay some more greys down here, and so on. There are some street lights there, and I'm just wondering whether to put them in now or pluck them back out again at a later date. I'll put that in there and go take some reds over it, and I'll put that in there. And that's okay, it's kind of indicative, looking at the vanishing point, bearing that in mind as I lay the washes. And then we'll probably need to get a little bit of reinforcement going on there, sticking with largely either cobalt and raw umber or French ultramarine and burnt umber to take things darker. Okay, so they are kind of two mixtures on the scale of ever increasing depth of tone. I want to keep, if I can, the palette relatively together. Let's just put some story height information in there. There we go. That'll do for some indication of the scale of these buildings. And I'll pop something in there and maybe some more information there. Wet into wet. I just want to take a couple more minutes. We're 20 minutes in here. Maybe take another 5 minutes and then we'll see if it's an opportune moment for all concerned to have a break. So I'm just going to put some story height stuff in here. This is actually advertising information. So what I'm really looking for is something, and it's not particularly convincing, forgive me, but I'm looking for something that will give me the proportion vaguely of white to background colour to indicate that, you know, maybe there's something going on there. I'm reaching for alizarin, light red. In actual fact, I've not put alizarin in, I've put permanent rose in. So I'm reaching for permanent rose, and I'll add some, just bringing this brush back to a point again, I'll add some hieroglyphics there. Okay. Then using the same colour, I think, dilute version, what I'll do is I'll just bring some of these violets down there. I'm going for a warm red, orange affiliated, cadmium red. That's a warm red with some yellow in it, hence the oranginess, so we call that a warm red. The alizarin was a cool red. It was leaning towards violet, it has blue in it. Warm and cool are terms that are worth getting to grips with when you're painting. I find that thinking about the colour temperature of an objective helps me to nail what sort of, or which portion of the palette I need to be looking at for my mixtures. If it's warm, I can look at the warm side of my palette. If it's cool, I can discount half of what's going on in the palette and just concentrate on some other bits and pieces. I'm not happy with that, with its concentration. So now I'm diluting. Don't want to ride roughshod over too many things here. Want to get some indicators of signage and paraphernalia, the Times Square paraphernalia, just so that we can get some indication of scale in here. The objects in the foreground that I'm suggesting, whatever they be, could be or should be larger scale than the objects in the background. There's a New York taxi there, which looks like a Ford Escort in my drawing, but so be it. Okay, so I'm going to populate this some more. It needs to be populated with paraphernalia and people, and that's something that I'll attend to in the second half of this. At the moment it's formless and scaleless, other than there are vague indicators of perspective and some references to large masses in the mist. But we'll see if we can tie this down in a little bit more detail. I think we'll take a couple of minutes break there. Sorry, I've been so engrossed in this, I don't think I've given you a second thought. But let's take a couple of minutes break and then pick it up from there. Thanks.
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA, Society for All Artists, is here to inform, encourage and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles, and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
Best thing about being a member is the inspiration with the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I can shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.
Hi and welcome back again. I was tempted to try and make some progress while you were gone, but I've managed to resist the temptation. So let's pick up where we left off. And I'm just going to put in here some bits and pieces to start to try and nail the scale of what's happening in here. And in fact, I'm going to scrub that and leave it damp and then do the same exercise again, because I didn't think that was coming at me through the mist. So now that's wet into wet, and that's a bit better. It's going to migrate more than I wanted it to, but that's life. Timing, as you, those amongst you who are familiar with watercolour, timing is hugely important in watercolour. The time lapse. It's aggravated in this situation by kind of an unfamiliar room temperature, and that's important to get familiar with these things so that you can anticipate performance of the paint in the painting as you move along. You don't want to take anything at risk and get the timing wrong. So I'm leaning in here. There's a guy here, he's the man in the street, he just happens to be on a pedestal, and I'm going to just pop him in. There. I've not drawn him in any detail, and in fact the drawing that I did do I've now erased with my hand. But we can see there the gist of him. If you spend too long a time drawing these things, you'll find that they become stale and overdeveloped, or at least I find that. I'll just indicate that there's a snowy situation on the base of this, and I'll pop him a stick in. It might be Chaplin, I don't know. And I'll populate the rear of the painting down here with thinner mixtures than that, with indicators of hubbub at street level. Here we go. Here's some hubbub at street level. I'm just going to leave some whites and lights out. I may glaze over them at a later stage, but I want something with a smaller scale to it to occur, to appear in my painting. So I'm kind of pattern making there. I'm going to add a significant wash here to proceedings. Take it around. It really doesn't matter how many signboards, what scale, what proportion, or the landscape portrait or whatever. It just matters that we get something in that creates a commotion in the street. I'm going to pop that taxi in on the left hand side. I think you can pick that up on the photograph that you're seeing. So a bit of glass in a couple of windows. I'll come back to this probably. I just need those washers to get laid down. I'm going with a warm yellow, cadmium, and I'm going to just add in some coach lines on this. Leaving a white out here and there doesn't go amiss. It indicates a bit of bodywork in the car. If I put something there, then we've got two sides to this taxi, a side and a back, if you like. So that's a bit of an indicator of what's happening there. The roof doesn't seem to be catching, or the colour in the roof isn't figuring in the photograph, so I'll go with that, and I'll pop in a couple of people here and some other oddments. Not that the people are odd, but I'm going to put some oddments in here. And just checking for eye level across the painting. Here's some figures, all busy coming along the street. I'll follow the perspective line. I might as well get some more in here and get it busy. Okay? And I want to concentrate some tone around street level. There's no point working too hard on this, and I shan't. I'll take this figure down to, and this figure down to roof level of the car, so that the car roof is described in the negative, as we say in painting circles. Okay, so busy, 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 and so on along the boulevard. Boulevard, sidewalk, wrong city, wrong continent. And I'm going to go across to the right-hand side, which I realise I told Gary I was going to do, so forgive me for that. I said one thing and do another, it's not unusual. And I'm just popping in here from the photograph some, the odd flesh tone, permanent rose, bit of cad yellow, just to say that there are 3-4 sparring figures here. I don't know what they're doing, doesn't really matter. There they are. Are they wearing boxing gloves? This one is. And so on, but that gives us some kind of indication, and I'll pop some perspective lines in here. Okay, there's a lighting gantry there which we may not have time for. All these details could be effectively developed, and I'll just paraphrase this because there isn't time in a kind of a 40-minute presentation to nail everything, but we need to at least record symptoms of various environments, the symptoms of curvature around here, the symptoms of nearness, which means darks on the right, and farness, which means lights on the left, and so on. So we get some kind of feeling of perspective in the strength of washers. Kodak is down here, probably needs spicing up a little bit, so we'll take Kodak down there and let that dry. I'm going to populate the background to that signage with a wash there. And what I'm going to do is, it doesn't matter, I don't need to form the letters now, the Kodak letters. All I need to do is place a red and then bring a dark to it in a bit and try and coax out the word Kodak from there. Okay, otherwise you find yourself working to boundaries twice, which is completely unnecessary. If you put the weak colour down first and then the strong colour afterwards to find what the information that you're looking for, that's a good way to work. It's economical and it helps the painting flow as well. Don't know what UFC is, but there is some there, and I'll just, again, same principle, get some yellows in there, and we will come back to that. Cobalt, more cobalt, and get some darks in here now.
Mind your head.
Thank you. Okay, get some darks in there. I've put, whenever I make a mark like this, marks like these, just get some raw umber I think, whenever I make marks like these, I'm very conscious of the need to get perspective in here. So the pitch of the lines, the pitch of the washes that I lay, pitch to the vertical, pitch to the horizontal, is carefully selected. It might not look very careful, but it is meant to be carefully selected. Kodak's never been spelt like that before, but we don't really care. Just going to put in there some indicators. Rinsing, going to get some washes that will vary in tone by just adding water to some of this information. Okay, and maybe tighten up one or two of the others if there were time. When I do strokes like this, I try to work with the entirety of my arm so that they become hit and miss marks. This here is coming on too strong, too much contrast for it to be distant. So I'm working through that look to reduce the contrast and to put it back in the scene. That's better, happier with that. We need to get some colour on here. This is more simple. This is light over dark instead of dark over, this is dark over light instead of light over dark. So I can lay the lighter, thinner, watery washes willy-nilly, and provided I maybe add a little bit of extra tone on the right-hand side there, that will give me some depth and some recession. I'd like to paint on here, but it's too wet. So let's get some skin tones in on the right-hand side of the sidewalk, and I'll just populate this with, again, more figures coming our way, keeping an eye on the left-hand side. Mind your head, Brian.
Mind your head, Brian.
Thank you. And just keep an eye on the left-hand side. That wasn't a good enough eye. I've now got a school party of children all walking along the sidewalk. So this would be a better view of things. Just get some heads in here, shopping, and that seems to tally. Happier with that. Let's get some strength in the bottom at sidewalk level. Let's get some strength here, through here, and get these figures hinted at. Don't want a monotony of tone. I want to actually vary the tone. So I'm picking up the odd drop of water here and there, and I am extending existing washes, dragging colour around. Leave the odd white here and there just to imply some organisation. Fortunately it's winter, so we can put dark overcoats on lots of these people and they'll all be happy. If it was summertime, I'd have to mess around on a tight time scale with white shirts and pale colours. So we can just indicate the busyness of what's going on at street level there, and I will again add some tranquilments, as my dad used to say, to this in order to populate and make it busy, give some feel for the chaos of Times Square. Bank of Am. Bank of, that's too wet. That's too wet. We'll come back and do Bank of Am in a minute. Over here, I'm going to quickly, again with a dark, and this is the Burnt Umber and French Ultramarine. With a dark, I'm going to just get some semblance of the bits and pieces that make up a car. It's not in my interest to follow the scheme here. There's snow which is obscuring parts of that car and preventing me from making it look car-like. So I don't fancy that at all. So I've made the thing work in my favour by inventing an alternative, and I'll just pop some darks in there and a screen, a wing mirror. Fortunately, in America, just like in the UK, red lights says it's the rear, and white and blue headlamps says it's the front. So that's an iconic mark there, which works well. I'm going to lay some tone through here, which will create in the negative a snow-filled sidewalk. And I'm going to work here as well in a similar kind of way. I'm going to worry about the figures later. Time is, as they say, of the essence. So we will, and I'll take this, we will trap on a pace, and I'm going to take the flat and just drag it down through there with some notions of reflection, which I ought to add there as well. That would be a good idea, to lift there and to lift there and so on. I'm going to wet here, but not with red paint. I'm going to wet through here, not going to the right because I'll crowd myself into a corner, and I'm dropping some wet into wet, some snow-like references into there. Swap brushes again, because the wash brush doesn't really want to know about that. Perspective means that stronger colours in the foreground and weaker colours as we get into the painting. This doesn't actually lead into the painting. The centre, the focal point, if you like, is maybe in here. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to just put some inclined lines there, and in conjunction with them, maybe some bits and pieces there. And I'm hoping that if I take these sideways, that we'll have something that might pass for parked vehicles along there. There's a van in the view, which is here somewhere, and I'll just pop that in. Maybe I should have done something about the fact that it's a black van. That's not going to be understandable, I don't think. Need to populate the rear of the painting. So I'll get some street level carnage going on. And there's a vehicle in there. Is there room? There is room for a vehicle. It's a white van with black doors. And if I take the sidewalk up to it there, I can create maybe some indication of a white van. There's a figure here in the foreground, and I'm thinking that he's probably reasonable to allow into the painting. So I'll go with a figure there. I haven't drawn this figure. I'm kind of improvising him as we go along. So there we are. I'll put his head down because it's cold and he needs to wrap up well. Okay, so I've sunk the head into, and he's just done some shopping, sunk the head into the shoulders there. Not too keen on the white trousers or the beige trousers because they're not really helping me in a snow scene, so I've passed on that, used a bit of license or constructive intervention. And this guy, I kept glancing at him, and he looks like he's got some kind of backpack. I don't know what that's about. He's either a ghostbuster or he's vacuuming the snow. Thanks, Gary. Either way, he's not going to have much success. So I'll pop him in, put him some black Wellingtons on, or some dark Wellingtons. Okay, and maybe some kind of cap. I don't know what he's doing. There's his Ghostbusters backpack, and there's his. I'll not spoil this by getting carried away. Through here, that's a dry brush stroke, not quite appropriate at this time, but more appropriate here in these clusters of ice that have been put on the side of the road. They've cleared, haven't they, the roadside by putting clusters of, loading up ice off the road. And that is a good way there with a dry brush, with violets interlaying with browns. That's a good way to just suggest without overshadowing whatever is going on. I don't want that stuff to dominate, but I do want its presence, because it's foreground when all said and done, to be felt. But the dry brush stroke in it helps to integrate it better into the painting. I haven't got time to put the lower appendages of these people in, so that's what they've got. And is this a record? Five watch your heads in easily broken all. I hope I get some recognition for this at the end of the day. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to dot in any old thing. Okay, any old thing, just because it's better to have something in than nothing in, he said, disproving that point by laying things in too heavily. So I'm going to carry the tissue in my hand now. Can't go that strong there. Bank of. B-A-N-K of. Am. We could guess the rest. Bank of Am. Okay. And I'm going to add in some bits and pieces, some trinkets. That's the wrong height, but so be it. Important that we get some bits and pieces of iconic streetscape in here, leading us in kind of quite nicely into the painting. I'll step back just before I'm told to, hopefully, there, and add a red letter day there. I've not really had time to lay enough midtones to warrant laying some white opaque paint over the top, but I'm going to go for it anyway. Here's the white opaque paint coming in, and to be honest, I should have prepared that earlier, because it's not turgid enough in order to get it to flow. Non-handy, not to worry. I was going to dip the brush directly into the tube, but I've done something clever with the tube, so we can't do that. I'm going to put some scale lines up here. Watch your head, Brian.
Watch your head, Brian.
Thank you. I'm going to put some perspective lines in here. I'm going to add a semblance of signage here. If you're a purist and you're shrivelling at the sight of using a white in here, I'm sorry. What I'm doing here is using something to best effect. Okay? So the idea that it could be better, but we're not allowed to use white opaque paint by the purists, is not of consequence to me. Okay? It's a shame to have someone say, I could have done better if I'd been allowed to use this, that or the other. I suppose alternatively, you should learn to cope with certain circumstances. Mysteriously, some white paint has just appeared on the palette. So I'm using opaque white, SAA opaque white here. And we'll just see what that might give us. Okay, so I'm going to use the bare minimum of liquid, of water, just to get this going. And I can then add snow on the arms of anything that I want. I can make some of my street signage white instead of black. This is getting overpopulated. I need to just rein myself in because it's getting quite overdeveloped. It's in danger of getting overdeveloped. Okay, I suppose one thing that we could do, how long can I have at tops?
2 minutes.
Don't use it all at once. I'm going to use this, squeezing it into here, taking a toothbrush, and I'm going to hide a multitude of sins by making the snow fall. This will give the painting some continuity. And washers that run into washers give paintings continuity. I wasn't going to do that, and it's a little bit crude, but the painting needed to flow a little better than it has done. Different scale of the white marks is great because that gives it perspective. And I think I've actually got something happening at the weekend, the 10 artists this coming weekend in Baslow in Sheffield, me and some other artists, one of whom is the SAA's very own Jeff Kersey. And that's a fundraiser for an excellent cause, Sheffield Samaritans. I think I'm going to take this along to that, just so that it can be in sight if anybody wants to come and check it out and help out Samaritans in the process. It'd be nice to see you there. Take the tape off and just see what damage has been done. And then we'll call that a finish. This has been almost nailed down. And take that off as well. That gives us some kind of indication of what the morning has been about so far. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed that. And you've had some food for thought. Thanks for sharing the time with me. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA, Society for All Artists, is here to inform, encourage and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles, and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
Best thing about being a member is the inspiration from the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I can shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.